I got to be honest, I have not wanted to preach this sermon on the end times. And yet, a couple weeks ago, I had to teach Pastor Meagard's Bible study on Friday mornings, and went in to do the Bible study and discovered I had to lead a study on Mark chapter 13, the text for today. I thought, wow, what a coincidence. I still don't want to preach this sermon. So, I told my wife this morning that I really didn't want to preach this sermon. She had a great children's sermon, but I was scared to death for my sermon. And she said, okay, great sympathy. And she went down to do her devotions and came back upstairs and said, I got to tell you what the text for my devotion was this morning. And I said, what was it? And she said, Zephaniah 1, chapter 1, verse 14, which says, the great day of the Lord is near, near and coming quickly. Listen, the cry on the day of the Lord will be bitter, the shouting of warriors. There it goes on and on and on. And I said, oh man. Okay, God, you want me to preach on the end times. So I thought I'll try one last thing. And so I prayed fervently for the end times to come before I preached the sermon. And it didn't happen, so here we go. Well, you just got to stick with this. Now, end times. When we hear that phrase, we get all kinds of connotations in our head. We get all kinds of ideas. We have all kinds of things that are coming at us as we reflect upon this topic. I can remember vividly that people were convinced during my lifetime that the world was coming to an end. You remember? Turn of the century. Remember what it was called? The big fear? Y2K. Right? Oh, Y2K. Because with Y2K, everything was going to shut down, the grid was going down, and the world would crumble as we know it. People were building bunkers, packing away food. I missed it. Y2K didn't reveal what it said it was going to do. Now, what's the next one? You guys know the next one? 2012, right? December 21st, 2012, because the Mayan calendar ends on that date. Mysteriously ends. Mystically ends. Well, I respond, a calendar's got to end sometime, so they just picked December 21st to 2012. Who knows? Maybe that will be the end of the world. I don't know. They're making movies about this even, that 2012 is the next big date. Don't know. Maybe, maybe not. Another reassuring thing, in some ways, is the Anglican calendar, the Episcopal liturgical calendar. They take it out for another 200 to 400 years. So, according to the Anglicans, we're going to be around for a little bit longer. Now, it might seem like I'm making light of these predictions, and I am, okay? I am, because when I approach this topic of the end times, I believe that there is something we have to do, and the thing that we have to do is we have to prepare. We have to prepare for the end times. But the question is, how do we do that? I have a feeling that if the Lord wants everything to end, my building a bunker is not going to help me out a whole lot, okay? I heard of people, when Y2K was coming, that they were convinced that the grid was going down, so you know what they did? Their preparation was to charge their credit card through the limit and buy whatever they wanted, because all of it was going to be erased on January 1st, 2001. Didn't happen. I think they're still paying off their debt. So, how do we prepare for the end times? I want us to go to Mark chapter 13 and see what Jesus tells us. It says, as he was leaving the temple, one of his disciples said to him, look, teacher, what massive stones, what magnificent buildings. They were at the Temple Mount, and trust me, those were impressive stones. I did some research on those stones. King Herod, in the late BC period, built the Temple Mount. He fortified these walls, and the smaller stones that King Herod put in place, get this, they are 2 to 4 tons in size. These are the small ones. They're about 4 feet tall, okay? 4 feet by 4 feet. 4 tons. Yeah, I can tell you're all really impressed. I had no idea what 4 tons equated to either. So I did research, and I found that the average weight of an African elephant is 4 tons. Those are the small stones. The larger stones, the big boys, the ones that are on the bedrock, those things are 50 tons in size. That's, for all of you, 11 African elephants. 1 stone. So it's little wonder that these disciples saw these stones and said, "Whoa, those are incredible stones. This place is going to last forever." And Jesus says, "You see these great buildings? Not one stone here will be left one on another. Every single one will be thrown down." Wow. Do you know that 40 years later, in 70 AD, the Romans lay siege to the city of Jerusalem, starving the people out? Utter devastation, chaos, calamity. And once the Romans entered the city, they began to slaughter people randomly. Didn't care how old you were, didn't care if you were offering resistance or not, didn't care if you were a man or woman or child. They killed everybody. Estimates are 60,000 to 1,000,000 people were killed in that destruction. When they came to the temple, Josephus, an ancient historian, records that when they came to the temple, the general Titus said, "Okay, leave the temple alone. Don't bother it." And yet the soldiers under his command were so outraged by the resistance that the Jews had shown that they lit the temple on fire. Now, the temple was constructed of wood, but you know what was on the inside? What was decorating the whole thing? Gold and silver. And Josephus reports that the fire was so intense that the gold and silver melted from the temple and went down into the cracks of these great stones. And you know what? The Roman soldiers went and they got bars and they moved all those stones, knocking one off of the other to get to the gold and silver. 40 years later, Jesus' prophecy becomes a reality concerning those massive stones. So Jesus now is sitting on the Mount of Olives, opposite the temple. Peter, James, and John, and Andrew, they ask him privately, they say, "Lord, tell us when these things will happen. What will be the sign for us to know that these things are going to be fulfilled?" Now, you have to understand something. This is what I believe.